It was a bright, sunny afternoon when I first felt it. That weight on my chest that something was wrong. The kind of feeling you can't shake, the one that lingers like a dark cloud, blocking out the warmth of the sun. I had just finished a long week at work, eager to spend the weekend with him, my boyfriend, the man I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. We had been through so much together, weathered our fair share of storms, but we always came out stronger on the other side. Or at least, that's what I believed. We had been together for nearly 2 years, but in reality, it felt like we had been together for a lifetime. From the first moment we met, it was like we were inseparable. We shared everything, our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. We were that couple, the ones everyone envied, the ones who always seemed to be on the same page, who laughed at the same jokes, who understood each other without needing to speak. But that afternoon, everything changed. I had made plans to meet him at his place. We were going to grab some dinner, relax, and just enjoy each other's company after a hectic week. I remember feeling that familiar excitement building up inside me as I pulled up to his apartment, eager to see him. Little did I know, this would be the last time I'd ever feel that way. I rang the doorbell, and when he opened the door, I could tell something was off. His face was unreadable, his eyes avoiding mine. I thought maybe he was just tired, maybe stressed from work. I didn't think much of it at first. But as we sat down on the couch, the silence between us grew heavier, more uncomfortable. The tension was palpable. And then, out of nowhere, he said it. "I think we need to talk." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could feel my heart race as I tried to make sense of what he was saying. "What do you mean? What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could already feel the tremors of fear creeping in. He looked at me then, his eyes filled with something I couldn't place. Regret? Guilt? Maybe even shame. I don't know how to say this, he started, his voice shaky, but there was no mistaking the coldness in his tone. "But I think we should break up." Those words, they echoed in my mind, repeating over and over like a cruel chant. Break up. My mind went blank. I couldn't process it. I didn't know what to do with that information. What? Why? The question slipped out before I could stop it, my voice cracking with emotion. I don't feel the same way anymore," he said. His words were so casual, so indifferent, like he was talking about something as trivial as changing a shirt. "There's someone else." He paused, as if waiting for the words to sink in, and then, as if he hadn't just shattered my world into a million pieces, he added, "I'm seeing someone else. I'm in love with her." I couldn't breathe. My body felt like it was betraying me, as if it were trying to run away from the reality of what he had just said. I stared at him, unable to move, unable to speak. The world around me seemed to slow down, the air thick with the weight of his words. It was as if I had entered some kind of nightmare, a world where nothing made sense anymore. How could this be happening? How could he do this to me? After everything we had been through, after everything we had shared, how could he just walk away like this? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand how he could just throw everything away for her. Who was she? What did she have that I didn't? I was the one who had been there for him through thick and thin, the one who had supported him when things were tough, the one who had given him my heart. And now, I was being cast aside, replaced by someone else. "You're in love with her?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, as if saying it out loud would make it more real. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't bear to see the emptiness in his eyes, the indifference that seemed to pour from him. It was as if everything we had meant nothing. "Yeah," he said, his voice cold, distant. "I'm sorry, but it's over." I stood up, feeling my legs give out beneath me. I had to leave. I had to get away from him, away from this moment. I didn't know what to say, what to do. All I knew was that I was being ripped apart from the inside out. My heart ached, my chest tight with the weight of betrayal. But there was something else inside me too, something dark, something that had been simmering beneath the surface ever since he had spoken those words. Anger, a burning, relentless fury that threatened to consume me. I didn't know how to deal with this, but I knew one thing for sure: I would not let him get away with this. Not after everything. Not after he had torn my world apart. I wasn't going to let him walk away from me without facing the consequences. I left his apartment that day in a daze, walking out of the door as if I were on autopilot, my mind spinning in circles, my heart aching with each step. I barely noticed the cars driving by or the sounds of the city. Everything seemed muffled, distant. The only thing that mattered was the pain inside of me, gnawing at my soul. How could he? How could he betray me like that, so coldly, so easily? I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. I just needed to get away. My legs took me down the streets, my eyes blurry with tears that I couldn't even bring myself to wipe away. The world felt like it was spinning out of control, and I was just helplessly caught in its current. It wasn't until I reached the park that I stopped, standing there in the middle of the grassy field, staring out at nothing in particular. The trees swayed gently in the wind, the leaves rustling like whispers, as if the universe itself was mocking me. I felt so small in that moment, so insignificant. It was as if everything I had built, everything I had believed in, had just been torn down in a matter of seconds. The betrayal was suffocating. It wasn't just the breakup itself, it was the fact that he had chosen her, chosen someone else over me. I tried to picture her, but I couldn't. Who was she? What was she like? What made her so special? What did I lack that she had in abundance? I thought back to all the times I had stood by him, all the nights I had stayed awake listening to his problems, supporting him when things got tough. He had told me everything, or at least I thought he had, and now there was this stranger, this woman who had somehow wormed her way into his heart, into his life. He didn't even have the decency to tell me about her before it all fell apart. No, instead, he waited until the last possible moment, the moment when everything had already unraveled. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't accept it. How could someone I loved so deeply, someone I had trusted so completely, turn their back on me without a second thought? Was I not enough? Was I not worthy of the same loyalty I had given him? As the days passed, the weight of the betrayal only grew heavier. It was all-consuming. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, not the one I loved, but the one that had told me it was over. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head, trying to make sense of his words, trying to understand how it had come to this. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand an explanation. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that no words, no explanation, would ever be enough to make it right. What he had done wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple apology or an explanation. This was deeper than that. This was a betrayal of everything we had built, a betrayal of the trust I had given him. It was in those moments of anger and confusion that something began to shift inside of me. The pain was still there, but it was no longer the only thing I felt. Now there was something else, something darker, something that I didn't fully understand yet, but I could feel it rising within me like a storm waiting to break. It was revenge. I didn't want to admit it at first, didn't want to acknowledge the thoughts that were beginning to take root in my mind. But there they were, growing stronger every day. The idea of making him pay for what he had done to me, not just for the breakup, but for the way he had torn apart everything we had, for how easily he had moved on and left me behind like I was nothing. I began to think about ways I could make him feel the same pain, the same crushing emptiness I was feeling. I didn't want to hurt him physically, but emotionally? That was a different story. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be betrayed, to feel the sting of rejection the way I had. I wanted him to understand the consequences of his actions, to see the destruction he had caused in my life. But as these thoughts took hold, I couldn't help but wonder, what kind of person was I becoming? Was I really willing to go down this path, to allow my anger and my hurt to shape my decisions? The old me, the one who had believed in love, in second chances, would never have considered this. But now I wasn't sure who I was anymore. And that's when it hit me. The truth was, I wasn't just angry at him. I wasn't just hurt by what he had done. I was also angry at myself. Angry for being so blind, for not seeing the signs sooner. Angry for trusting him, for giving him my heart, my love, without question. How could I have been so foolish? I sat down on a bench in the park, my hands shaking as I tried to process everything. The wind had picked up, and I could feel the chill in the air, a reminder that life had a way of moving on, even when we felt stuck. I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know what my next step would be. But one thing was clear, I couldn't let him get away with this, not without facing the consequences. The betrayal had cracked something deep within me. It had unleashed a side of me I hadn't known existed, A side that wasn't going to sit back and let him walk away unscathed. I was going to make sure he felt every ounce of the pain he had caused me, and so I began to plan. Days passed, and the anger that had simmered inside me began to turn into something more, something actionable. I couldn't just sit around and wait for time to heal the wound he had inflicted. No, I had to do something. I had to make him feel it. I needed to regain control of my life, and the only way I could see that happening was through action, through making him regret his decision. I won't lie to you, the idea of revenge didn't come to me all at once. It was more like a slow burn, an ember that sparked in the back of my mind and then began to grow until it was consuming every thought. At first, I resisted it. I told myself that I should just move on, that I shouldn't let him have this power over me. But every time I tried to let go, I'd see his face in my mind, hear his words ringing in my ears. I'm in love with her. Her. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about this woman who had somehow come into our lives and ruined everything. I didn't even know who she was, but I could feel her presence in everything. In the way he had looked at me when he told me it was over, in the way he had casually dropped her name as if it didn't matter, as if I didn't matter. She was the reason behind it all, the reason for this deep, searing betrayal. I had to know more. I couldn't just sit in the dark wondering about her. I needed to uncover everything. Who was she? How did she worm her way into his heart? Was she really better than me, or was it just his twisted idea of what was exciting, new, and shiny? I didn't know the answers to these questions yet, but I was determined to find them. The first step was simple. I had to gather information. I went through his social media, which had once been something I never felt the need to question. Now it felt like a lifeline to understanding the truth, to seeing the reality of the situation through his eyes. I went through pictures, old posts, anything that might give me a clue as to who this woman was. It wasn't hard to find her. Her name kept popping up in the background of his posts, in the comments, in the tags. She was always there, lurking like a shadow I had never noticed before. I felt sick to my stomach seeing her face, knowing that she was the one who had taken everything from me. She had the life I thought was mine. She had the future I had imagined. She had him. But I couldn't stop now. I had to keep going. The next step was finding out who she really was, where she worked, what she liked, where she went. I wasn't going to stalk her, but I needed the information. I needed to understand her better, to know exactly what I was up against. As I dug deeper, I started to piece together a picture. Her name was Emily, and she worked at a local art gallery. She had moved to the city recently, and her life seemed to be filled with excitement, culture, and new adventures. She had that carefree, perfect life that I had always envied from afar. It seemed like she was everything I was not. Spontaneous, wild, and full of energy. And yet, there was something off about it, something that didn't sit right with me. The more I looked into her, the more I began to notice the small things that made me suspicious. For one, she had this aura of entitlement, of getting everything she wanted without having to try. And there was this constant need for attention in her posts, always showing off, always seeking validation. I couldn't help but feel like she wasn't real. Like she was just playing a role, hiding behind the image of this perfect, carefree woman. But the more I learned, the more I understood. She was exactly what he wanted. She was everything he had been missing in his life. She was fresh, new, and exciting. She was everything I wasn't, or at least, that's how he saw it. And as much as it hurt to admit, I knew it wasn't her fault. She wasn't the one who had broken my heart. He was. Still, the more I learned about her, the more my anger began to build. The idea of her with him, laughing with him, sharing intimate moments with him, it made my blood boil. The thought that she had taken my place, that she was now the one he was choosing over me, made me sick to my stomach. I wasn't going to just let this go. I wasn't going to sit back and watch them build this life while I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. No. I was going to make him understand what it felt like to be left behind. I was going to make sure he regretted his decision. And the best part? I was going to make sure Emily felt it too. The wheels in my mind were turning, and the plan was taking shape. It wasn't going to be something dramatic or over the top. I wasn't interested in destroying anyone's life. I didn't need to make her life a living hell. But I did need her to understand the cost of what she had done. She wasn't just some woman he had fallen for. She was the reason behind this betrayal. and I wasn't going to let her think she had won. I needed a plan, one that would make them both feel the weight of their actions, and I had just the idea. The first step in my plan was something subtle, something that wouldn't raise any immediate alarms. I didn't want to make it obvious. I wanted them both to feel the sting of their actions, but I needed it to unfold slowly, piece by piece. Revenge, I had learned, was most effective when it was layered, when the target didn't know what hit them until it was too late. I started with him, as much as it pained me to even think about his name. But I needed to hit him where it would hurt the most. I had to make him realize that he couldn't just walk away without consequences, without acknowledging the pain he had caused. I needed him to feel what I felt, betrayed, discarded, insignificant. It wasn't hard to get in touch with him. He was still following me on social media, still texting me occasionally, still acting like nothing had changed. It was almost as if he wanted me to be okay with what he had done. But I wasn't okay, not by a long shot, and he needed to know that. The text started out innocently enough, just small talk. "How's your day going?" he'd ask, as if we were still friends. I never responded right away. I let him stew, let him wonder why I wasn't replying, and when I did respond, I was careful, calculated. I made sure to keep things polite but distant. I didn't want him to think that I had moved on, that I was okay with what he had done, but I also didn't want to show too much of my hand. Not yet. I wanted him to feel like he was losing me, and the more distant I became, the more he would try to pull me back in, and that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to beg for my attention, to realize that he had made a mistake. I didn't want to tell him right away what I had planned. I didn't want him to think I was simply lashing out in anger. I needed him to feel like he was being rejected, like he was the one being abandoned for once. It wasn't enough for me to just get back at him. I wanted to break his illusions of control. I wanted him to know that he couldn't just discard me and expect everything to be fine. So I started to change my life in small ways that would make him notice. I started going out more, posting pictures of me with friends, laughing, living my life without him. I wanted him to see that I was doing just fine without him, that his absence in my life didn't leave a hole. In fact, it felt like a weight had been lifted. I wanted him to feel the sting of knowing he was no longer needed, no longer important to me. The first time I noticed a change in his behavior, it was subtle. He started texting me more frequently, sending me long, heartfelt messages about how much he missed me, how sorry he was for everything. He even apologized for the breakup, as if that would change anything. But I didn't respond right away. I let the messages sit there, unread, until they piled up. And when I did reply, I was cold, distant. "It's fine," I'd say. "We both know it was for the best." But inside I was smiling, because I knew that I was getting to him. I was making him feel like he had made a mistake, like he was losing something precious, and that was exactly what I wanted. As much as I was focusing on him, I couldn't ignore Emily. I had to find a way to involve her, to make her feel like she wasn't immune to the consequences of their actions. She had to feel the discomfort, the uncertainty of knowing that she had taken someone else's place. But I couldn't go after her directly, not yet. That would have been too obvious. I needed to be more strategic. It was time to start playing the long game. I knew that Emily worked at the art gallery, but I didn't know much else about her life. The more I learned about her, the more I realized that there was a way in. She had a passion for art, and she was involved in several local art events and shows. It wasn't difficult to find a few upcoming exhibitions that she was associated with. I had been to a few art shows in the past, and I knew they could get pretty crowded, so I decided to attend one. It was the perfect opportunity to see her in person, to gauge her personality, and to figure out how to make her feel the pressure. I made sure to look my best. I wanted to appear confident, independent, not the broken girl who had been left behind. I was determined to show her that I wasn't someone to be overlooked. If she thought she had won, she was in for a surprise. As I walked through the art gallery that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Here I was, in the midst of it all, the life they were building, the life he had chosen over me. But I wasn't going to let them enjoy their new beginning without a little disruption. I kept my distance at first, observing. I didn't approach Emily right away, but I watched her. She was exactly how I had imagined her, poised, confident, and surrounded by people who admired her. But there was something about her, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe it was the way she interacted with everyone. Her smile that seemed a little too rehearsed, a little too perfect. It was as if she was trying too hard to be the perfect version of herself. I stayed in the background, mingling with others, letting my presence be known without drawing too much attention to myself. It wasn't long before Emily noticed me. She caught my eye from across the room, and I could see the recognition flicker in her gaze. She knew who I was. She had to. But she didn't approach me. She didn't say a word. She just turned back to her conversation, a slight tension in her posture that I knew was a reaction to seeing me. I smiled to myself. The game had just begun. The days following that art show were a strange mix of satisfaction and anticipation. I had caught her off guard, made her uneasy without even having to say a word. That was the first piece of the puzzle. Now, the real work began. I had her attention, but that wasn't enough. I needed her to question everything. Question herself, question him, question the choices they had made. The more I made her feel uneasy, the more pressure I could apply. But I wasn't going to do this out of rage. No, I would do it with calculated precision. Every move, every word would be designed to unsettle them both, one step at a time. I began by letting little things slip into conversation with him. I didn't want him to think I was completely moving on, but I also didn't want him to think I was pining for him. I needed him to see that I had strength, that I had moved past the heartbreak. But at the same time, I wanted him to realize that his decision had consequences, that someone else was making their way into his life, and it wasn't just him who could have what he wanted. It was my turn to reclaim control. One evening, after a particularly casual exchange, I mentioned something nonchalantly about a new guy I'd met, someone who seemed really interesting. I didn't give much detail, just enough to leave him curious, wondering. I didn't even know if I was ready to date again, but I knew it was enough to rattle him. His reaction confirmed everything I had suspected. It hurt him, just a little. I could tell by the way his texts became more frequent after that. I kept it subtle, never giving him too much, always leaving just enough to make him feel like he was losing me in a way he wasn't ready for. I wanted him to feel the jealousy, the confusion, the kind of emotional turmoil that he had put me through. But then it was time to turn the heat up on Emily. She hadn't contacted me directly after the gallery. She had avoided it, as I expected. I don't think she knew how to approach me, or maybe she thought she was above it. Either way, I wasn't waiting for her to make a move. I decided to take control of that as well. One evening, I made my way to the same cafe she frequented, a cozy little spot near the gallery, where she often posted pictures of her drinks or her friends. It was the perfect place to bump into her casually. The more I blended into her world, the more it would destabilize her. I wasn't there to confront her. No, that would be too obvious. I was there to be seen, to make sure she noticed me. I ordered my coffee, then found a table in her line of sight, just enough to get her attention without looking like I was trying to force a confrontation. Minutes passed, and I could feel her gaze drift towards me. She seemed to hesitate, unsure if she should approach. That hesitation? That was exactly what I wanted. After a few moments, she finally stood up and walked toward me, her steps hesitant, almost too controlled. She smiled awkwardly, trying to mask the tension that was clearly written all over her face. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her tone polite but stiff. She was trying to be casual, trying to act like there was no bad blood between us, but I could see the underlying insecurity in her eyes. I looked up from my drink and smiled, back, keeping my expression neutral. "It's a nice place. I've been here a few times. How have you been?" Her smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "I'm good. Been busy with work, you know. The usual." Her voice trailed off as if she wasn't sure what to say next. I could see the discomfort in her, the self-consciousness creeping in. She wasn't used to feeling uncertain, especially not around someone like me, someone who had been there before her. I leaned back slightly in my chair, taking a sip of my drink, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. The tension between us was thick, but I didn't break it. I was perfectly content to let her stew in it, to let her feel what I felt every time I thought of them together. Every time I thought about how easily she had come into his life and replaced me. She finally broke the silence. "So, how are things with you and, You know, him? I raised an eyebrow, pretending to be surprised by the question. What do you mean? You and James, she said, her voice quiet, almost tentative. There it was. The subtle confirmation that she knew exactly who I was, that she knew about the life I had once shared with him. I smiled, the words coming easily. Oh, you mean my ex? We're not together anymore. Her eyes flickered, and I saw a flash of something. Maybe relief, maybe guilt. I couldn't tell, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had now planted the seed in her mind. She had to wonder what had happened between us, why we weren't together anymore. I didn't tell her that he had broken up with me for her. I didn't need to. She would figure it out, or at least, I wanted her to think about it. Well, I hope everything's okay with you, she said, forcing another smile. But there was an edge to it now, a slight awkwardness that hadn't been there before. I could tell she was uncomfortable, questioning herself, and I knew that, deep down, she was feeling the weight of it. I'm fine, I said, standing up and gathering my things. Thanks for asking. It was nice seeing you. I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving her standing there, her mind racing. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, wondering what had just happened. But that was the point. I wasn't going to confront her directly. I wasn't going to make it obvious. I wanted her to doubt herself, to feel the discomfort I had felt. I wanted her to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that she wasn't immune to the consequences of their actions. The more I let her stew in her own uncertainty, the closer I got to my goal. And with every passing day, it became clearer to me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't just about getting back at him or making her feel guilty. This was about reclaiming my life, my power, my confidence. It was about showing them both that I wasn't someone to be discarded, that I wasn't someone to be forgotten. And I would make them realize that, one move at a time. The weeks after that encounter in the cafe felt like a slow, steady build-up, like a pressure cooker about to explode. I was playing my part perfectly. I could see the changes in James, the way his texts became more frequent, his tone more urgent, as if he was trying to get me back, trying to fix what he had broken. But I wasn't falling for it. Not anymore. I had him exactly where I wanted him. He had underestimated me. He thought that I would just move on, let go of the hurt, and eventually fade into the background of his life. But he didn't realize that this betrayal was something that wasn't going to fade. This was something that would burn forever in the back of my mind until it was dealt with. And Emily? She had become a puzzle I couldn't stop solving. Every little encounter with her, every fleeting moment, felt like another piece falling into place. I had seen her discomfort in the cafe, and I knew that she was starting to realize that she wasn't as secure as she thought she was. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed her to feel completely unsettled, to realize that her role in his life wasn't as invincible as it seemed. So I began to dig deeper into their relationship. As much as I hated the thought of them together, I needed to know exactly how deep they were into this thing. I couldn't let him think I was weak, that I was still clinging to something that he had cast aside. No, I needed to understand their connection. I needed to know how she fit into the pieces of his life. What was she offering that I hadn't? I found out more than I expected. Through a mutual friend, I learned that James and Emily had been getting closer much faster than I had realized. They were practically inseparable, spending their weekends together, making plans for the future, things I had never imagined him doing with me. And that realization hit me hard. I had always known he was capable of love, but this felt like he had chosen her over me in every sense. He hadn't just fallen for her, he had given her everything, and that hurt in ways that words couldn't describe. But as the hurt and anger simmered, something else came to the surface. A part of me, a part that I didn't even know existed, started to feel something else. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about proving something to myself. Proving that I was more than just the woman who had been left behind, that I wasn't someone who could be discarded so easily. I couldn't afford to act impulsively, though. I couldn't just lash out without thinking. I needed a more sophisticated approach, so I took my time, watching and waiting, observing their every move, their every word. I noticed how Emily would post pictures of them together, how she'd talk about him constantly on social media, trying to make their relationship appear perfect, trying to rub it in the faces of everyone who followed her. I couldn't let her get away with that either. I decided that the next step would be more direct, more in her face. I knew how much she craved attention. She wasn't the type to shy away from the spotlight. She loved being the center of it, loved being the one everyone was watching. And I knew that, at her core, she was no different than James. She wanted validation, constant approval, the kind of attention that made her feel invincible. I began to show up at the places she liked to frequent, at the events she loved. Slowly, I started to insert myself into her world, into her circle. At first, it was harmless. A few well-placed encounters, a few moments that made her feel like she was being watched, like she couldn't escape the shadow of my presence. It was all subtle, nothing direct, just enough to make her feel the unease I had felt when I first saw her with him. I knew she would see me at the local market, the one she frequented every Saturday. I made sure to run into her, making it look completely accidental. "Oh, you're here too?" I said casually, my voice friendly but with an edge. She looked startled for a moment, but then quickly covered it up with a tight smile. "Yeah, just picking up a few things," she replied, her voice almost too upbeat. I could tell she was uncomfortable. Good. It was working. "You and James seem to be really happy," I said, letting the words hang in the air, just enough to make her wonder what I meant. She paused, blinking at me for a moment, clearly unsure of how to respond. I could see the nervousness in her eyes, the unease creeping in, and I knew that I had just planted the seed of doubt. "I mean, I guess we are," she said, her smile a little more forced than before. I could see through her act, through her perfect little world that she was desperately trying to maintain. She wasn't as secure as she thought. She didn't have everything figured out, and I was going to make sure she knew that. We exchanged a few more pleasantries before I left, but it was clear that the encounter had left its mark on her. I could see it in her eyes. I could see that, just for a moment, she questioned everything she thought she knew about her place in his life, and that was exactly what I wanted. But there was one more piece of the puzzle left to move. James, the final move I had been planning for weeks. I knew it was time to confront him. Not directly, but in a way that would shake him to his core. I had to make him realize that he couldn't have everything. He couldn't have her and still have me in the back of his mind. He had to know that he couldn't just erase the past like it had never mattered. The final stage of my plan was ready. The day had arrived. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, letting everything build to a boiling point. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and I knew that confrontation wasn't always about what was said. It was about how it was delivered, the weight of the silence, the tension that hung in the air. I had to make sure that James and Emily both realized, at that exact moment, the true cost of their actions. They had thought they could slip away without consequences, but I wasn't going to let that happen, not without making them feel the impact of their betrayal. I called him that morning, knowing that he wouldn't be expecting it. He had been texting me more than usual in the past few days, a mix of apologies, attempts at friendly conversations, and vague let's-catch-up messages. I could feel that he was testing the waters, trying to see if he could worm his way back into my life, back into my good graces. He probably thought that after enough time had passed, I would soften, that the wound would heal. But he had underestimated my resolve. I had let his text sit there for hours before responding, each message an opportunity to let him sweat, to make him feel uncertain. This wasn't going to be just a casual conversation. No, this was going to be the moment that would bring everything to light. I needed him to hear it from me, to feel the truth of what he had done. When I finally dialed his number, I could feel my heartbeat in my chest. I wasn't nervous, but the weight of the moment settled over me like a storm cloud. It was time. "Hey," his voice came through the receiver, bright and hopeful. Too hopeful, like he was about to get everything he wanted. "James," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." There was a slight pause, and then I could hear the shift in his tone. "Yeah, of course. What's going on?" "I think you know what's going on," I replied, my voice calm but laced with something sharp. "I'm done pretending like this doesn't matter." "Pretending?" he repeated, his voice faltering slightly. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, letting the words roll off my tongue like I had been rehearsing them for days. "I mean that what you did wasn't just a breakup. It wasn't just a bad decision. You betrayed me, James. You chose her. You tossed everything we had aside like it was nothing." I could feel the tension on the other end of the line, the uncomfortable silence hanging between us. He had probably expected me to be emotional, to be devastated, to beg him to come back. But instead, I was calm, collected, something he wasn't ready for. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice faltering, trying to sound sincere. "It just happened, and No," I cut him off, my voice growing a little firmer. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to act like this was some accident. You chose her. You made that decision. And you did it without any thought of what it would do to me. You just walked away. I didn't mean for it to go down like this," he continued, the guilt in his voice now more apparent. "I'm sorry, really." "I'm sure you are," I said, not allowing any softness to creep into my voice. "But here's the thing, James. Your apology doesn't fix what you've done. It doesn't make it okay, and it certainly doesn't erase the fact that you've moved on. You're with her now, aren't you? Living the life you think you deserve. But I'm not going to let you think you can just erase everything we shared, everything I gave you, just because you decided it was time to move on." There was a long pause on his end. I could tell he was struggling to come up with something to say that would make it all better, something that would patch up the hole he had ripped in my life. But I wasn't giving him that chance. "James, you need to understand something," I continued, my voice cold now. "You don't get to have it both ways. You can't just tear me apart, walk away, and then think that you can casually slip back into my life when it's convenient for you. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your safety net. I never thought of you that way," he said quickly, almost desperately. "I don't care what you thought," I snapped back, finally letting some of the anger bleed into my words. "Because what you did was all that matters. You hurt me, and you hurt her too. Because trust me, she knows, James. She knows exactly what she's walking into." I could hear him shift on the other end, the uncomfortable truth of what I had said starting to sink in. "What are you talking about? You think she's got it all figured out, don't you?" I said. "That she's the one who's going to be there for you, that she's the one who's perfect. But I can see right through her. She's just like you, James. She's just as self-serving as you are. And the best part, she doesn't even realize it yet." There was another long pause, and this time I could hear the frustration in his voice. "Why are you doing this? Why can't you just move on?" "Because I don't forget," I said, my voice calm but with a steel edge. "I don't forget how you treated me. I don't forget how easily you turned your back on everything we had. And I won't let you walk away from this unscathed. You don't get to hurt me, James, and then just walk off into the sunset with her while I'm left to pick up the pieces of my life. I won't let you." The silence on the other end was deafening. He didn't know what to say, and that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to feel helpless, to realize that he was no longer in control of this situation. He had lost his power over me, and now he was the one scrambling to regain it. "I've got nothing more to say to you," I said, my voice hardening. "I hope you and Emily are happy together, but don't think for a second that this is over. Because it's not." I hung up the phone, feeling a rush of satisfaction as the silence filled the room. I had said everything I needed to say. I had taken back the power that he had stolen from me, and now I could only sit back and watch as the consequences of his actions started to unfold. The days that followed were quiet, but they were heavy with the knowledge that the storm I had started was far from over. James had gone silent after our conversation. I knew that he was processing what I had said, but I also knew that silence wasn't the same as resolution. He might have heard me, but I wasn't sure if he truly understood the weight of what I had laid on him. I wasn't sure if he'd ever understand. But what mattered now was that I had spoken my truth, and that in itself was powerful. As for Emily, the tension between us continued to simmer. She didn't reach out, not that I expected her to, but I could feel her watching, just as I was watching her. Every time I saw her posts on social media, every time she tagged James in something, I couldn't help but wonder how much she knew. Did she realize what had happened? Did she understand the role she had played in all of this? Or was she still blinded by the illusion of their perfect life together? I couldn't let her think for a second that I had been silenced. I wasn't going to allow her to think she had won, not when she didn't even understand the real cost of what she had done. And that's when I decided that it was time to take the final step. I had made them both feel it, but it was time to put everything into motion, to push them both into the reality that I had lived in for weeks, the reality of the damage they had caused. It started with one simple act. I had noticed something in one of Emily's recent posts. It was an innocent picture of her and James, their arms around each other, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. The caption was dripping with sweetness, as if they were the perfect couple, untouchable, impervious to the world around them. But there was one small detail that caught my eye. In the background of their photo, there was a piece of artwork. It was a piece that I recognized immediately. It had been the first art piece that James and I had ever bought together, back when things between us were still easy, when everything felt like it was falling into place. It was something personal, something symbolic of the life we had built, something she had no business having in her world. At first, I was furious. How could she be so blind to what she was doing? How could she claim something that wasn't even hers? It wasn't just a piece of art. It was a part of my past with him. It was part of our memories, and now it was part of their world. I knew that I had to act. I had to make sure that she knew that this wasn't some casual relationship for me. This was a war for my dignity, for the respect I had lost. They needed to understand that I wasn't just a stepping stone, something to be discarded for the next shiny thing. They needed to understand that the things they took from me were things I would never forget. I took to social media. I wasn't interested in a public argument or a direct confrontation. Instead, I made a post of my own, one that wasn't for anyone else but for them. I posted a picture of the exact same artwork, the one they had in their living room, the one I had once cherished. And I captioned it, "Some memories are too valuable to let go of." It was subtle, but it was unmistakable. It was a reminder of the life I had with James, of the bond we had shared before it all fell apart. And I knew deep down that when Emily saw it, she would know exactly what I meant. She would know that this wasn't just some relationship that could be swapped out for the next one. This was my past. And no matter how hard she tried to claim it, she would never be able to take it from me. Within hours, Emily saw the post. I could feel the shift in the air. I could see her reaction in her story updates, the forced smile, the defensive way she started posting more about James, trying to prove something, trying to assert their dominance. But it wasn't working. I could see through it, and so could she. James didn't respond, not directly, but I knew he had seen it. His behavior toward me shifted again. This time, he wasn't trying to text me constantly. He wasn't trying to apologize. He had retreated. He had become aware of the truth of the situation. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about understanding the depth of his mistake. And that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to realize that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase me. I wanted Emily to realize that she was living in a world built on someone else's past, that her place in James's life didn't exist in a vacuum. They had both taken something from me, but I wasn't going to let them forget the cost. I started to focus on myself again. It was hard, but I was beginning to heal, piece by piece. Every small victory, every subtle move, helped me feel like I was regaining control of my own life. I wasn't the broken, betrayed person I had been when this all started. I was stronger now, smarter, and more in control of my future. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, reclaiming my life, and realizing that the power was always in my hands. James had thought he could just walk away. Emily had thought she could slip into a role she didn't deserve. But in the end, they both learned the same lesson. Nothing comes without consequence. I wasn't going to let them have the last word, and I wasn't going to let them think they had won. The weeks that followed my final act of reclaiming control were strangely peaceful. The storm had passed, but the ripples of everything I had set in motion were still there, lingering in the air like an unfinished song. It wasn't over, not in the way I had once imagined it. Revenge, I realized, wasn't something that happened in one grand moment. It wasn't about a single confrontation or a singular act that would make everything right again. It was about the aftermath, the slow burn of consequences, the long-term changes that take root when you've been pushed too far. For the first time in weeks, I found myself sleeping through the night without the constant weight of betrayal on my chest. I didn't have to check my phone every 5 minutes, or wonder if James was going to reach out, if Emily was going to throw something in my face. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't hear from James for a while after my social media post. And Emily? She disappeared too. The once constant updates, the pictures of them together, the boastful proclamations of their perfect life, suddenly stopped. It was like they both knew the game had changed. They knew that they had no ground to stand on anymore, not with me in the picture. And that was enough. In the silence that followed, I began to heal. It wasn't instant, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. I started taking back the pieces of my life that I had lost. I started hanging out with friends again, doing the things that made me feel like myself, things that had been swallowed up by the weight of that betrayal. I started finding joy in things that had nothing to do with him, with them. I felt lighter, free even. But as time passed, I realized something else. It wasn't just about him or Emily anymore. It wasn't just about their betrayal. It was about me. It was about the person I had been before I let them break me, and the person I had become after. There was power in what had happened, and not just in the revenge. The true power was in what I had learned from it all. I had been angry, and justifiably so. I had felt humiliated and heartbroken, and I had every right to make them feel the weight of their actions. But what I came to realize was that the most important thing wasn't what I had done to them. It was how I had risen above it. I had walked through the fire of that betrayal and come out the other side stronger than ever. I wasn't the same person who had let James into my life so fully. I wasn't the same person who had allowed him to take so much from me without thinking twice. I was someone who had taken my power back, someone who was no longer willing to settle for anything less than respect. James reached out once more, months after everything had blown over. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea to get back together. It was a simple message, asking how I was. No mention of the past, no mention of what he had done. It was as if he was trying to step back into my life as if nothing had ever happened. And for a moment, I almost responded. I almost let myself slip back into the comfort of what we had once shared. But then I stopped. I remembered everything. The pain, the betrayal, and the realization that he had never been the person I thought he was. I deleted the message, and I felt no regret. I realized in that moment that I had already moved on, not just from James, but from the need for validation, for answers, for closure. I had given myself all of that. I didn't need anyone else to tell me that I was worth it. I didn't need them to tell me that I was strong. I already knew. And that was enough. Emily? She eventually resurfaced, but by then, I didn't care. She had already lost, not because of anything I had done, but because she was living in the shadow of someone else's past, trying to carve out a future on a foundation built on lies and betrayal. I wasn't interested in being a part of her story. She wasn't part of mine anymore. The truth was, I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need them to feel the weight of their actions for me to move forward. The real victory had always been in finding my own strength again. And I had done that. I had taken back my life. What I had learned in all of this was something far more valuable than any act of revenge. I had learned that no matter how much someone hurts you, no matter how much they take from you, the most important thing you have is the power to heal, the power to rise above it, the power to walk away with your head held high, knowing that your worth was never tied to anyone else's actions. Revenge? It was only ever a stepping stone, a way for me to take control of my own narrative, to show myself that I was capable of standing up for myself. But it wasn't the endgame. It never was. The endgame was healing, and I was finally free.